the Grey Hat Beard podcast. Hello and welcome to show 71 of Grey Hat Beard Princess, the modern workplace podcast where we talk about all things Microsoft 365. I'm the Grey of Grey Hat Beard Princess. My name's Kevin McDonald. I'm a solutions architect at Avanade and also a Microsoft 365 apps and services MVP and a Viva Explorer. One day I will get that right.
We don't have a Hat with us today. Hat is currently on a train somewhere. I'm guessing on his way back home. So you have myself. My name is Gary Trinder. I am the beard of Grey Hat Beard Princess. I am a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft, focusing on Microsoft 365 development.
And we don't have a princess. She is rocking out in Birmingham, of all places, which we. Yeah, I was going to say something rude, but I don't want to be attacked by lots of people from Birmingham. So, yeah, she is rocking out there and can't join us. But instead, we have a fabulous guest, Anoop. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello Kevin, hello Gary, nice to meet you. And hello everyone, my name is Anoop and I'm a developer at a company called Content and Cloud here in the UK. And it's great to be on the show, and thank you for inviting me on the podcast. And just a bit about myself. I am involved in the Microsoft 365 or the SharePoint space for about 10 years now, I think. Yeah. And then
I like the way you say that, like that's a long time. I'm like, only 10. God, newbies.
Right, yeah. And I'm an MVP in the Microsoft 365 development space. That's me.
Having to relearn it there because it was office development for so
Yes.
long, and then they've just changed it to 365 as well as the apps and services, right? But you're also a member of PnP as well.
Yes,
Tell
that's
us
right.
about that.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Patterns and Practices community, which is also called now as the Microsoft 365 platform community.
What? Microsoft's renamed it? No. Actually, no, sorry, I should say community renamed it, didn't they? Yeah, I should say that.
Yeah.
So what the question? So for people who are on the patterns and practices, do you get specific roles within it, or not particularly?
So everyone is part of the community, and then it's an open source community, so people are welcome to make their contributions because we have various repositories on GitHub under the PnP account, and then people can make contributions into those repositories or join the calls that we have once every other week or every Thursday, basically, as part of the community. And there are also various sessions organized by other community members to tell you how, if you're a first-time contributor or a first-time presenter. It's a
but
great
I meant more in terms of the core team. Do you
right.
kind of have specific roles, and if so, what's your kind of focus within the core team?
Right. So, I mean, there are dedicated people who look after the repositories on their own. So there's no defined roles as such. So I'm mainly involved in contributions across several repositories. So yeah, that's why I am the one of the core members of the community.
Okay, well earned, I should say. I'm not trying to downplay. I was just, yeah, I guess kind of intrigued how different communities sort of form themselves, whether you have kind of dedicated roles within that, or it's a group of people and kind of get together and chat and agree direction on there. It's kind of, it's often quite useful to hear a little bit about what happens indoors that kind of comes out as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Gary's got lots he wants to say, but isn't saying it. He's got that look on his face.
It's just when Anoop mentioned it, it's just a group of people who are based in a community that just kind of come together, really. So it is kind of a, I've been a member of PnP for a while. I joined PnP through work in CLI for Microsoft 365, which I'm still working on. We all kind of come together, we share thoughts and ideas of things that maybe we've tried in CLI for Microsoft 365 and that other people have tried in other areas, and go, well, actually, it's a really good idea. Maybe we should try that in our repository. And basically, if you think about it, it's huge experimentation across different repositories. No one's kind of saying you must adhere to these rules, and it's we all kind of work differently. We work to what fits us as a team. Not every repository is the same, but you'll have common things where, let's say, David Warner and Hugo do the caring is sharing. It's very generic. It's how you can learn and get into all the repositories, but actually the badges that David had kind of started doing for contributors, CLI, we've kind of got joined with his initiative now to have CLI badges, that kind of stuff. But it's all very much a case of what you as a maintainer and your part of the community, if you like, is kind of looking for. So
yeah, I mean, it's not all dev stuff. I know the maturity model team do some really nice stuff. I was on their call last week, which was great, and yeah, it's always intriguing to know how these things kind of come together. I think that's a great example with the badges, where it kind of started in one area and spread out, and you see that. Yeah, I don't know if it's the right word, commonality appear in some areas and not others, but and you've got that single launch pad of pnp.github.io to go to and find out more.
Yeah.
As I said before the show started recording, Anoop, sometimes we go on the odd tangent and don't necessarily go quite to the plan.
That was one of them.
That was definitely an early starter for that one. So we've on Grey Hat Beard Princess previously, we've gone for a kind of two-part of doing the news and then the subject. We've decided this year, and there will be more announcements on exactly how the new structure is going to come, but we want to focus more on kind of hearing from people and hearing from particular subjects. So we're not going to be covering the news quite so much unless we see something that's big that's going on. So probably around Ignite and build times, whenever they are, we'll be looking towards those as well, and maybe cover some subjects, but in a slightly light-hearted way. But we'll certainly still have a lot of particular subjects. And Anoop is joining us today to talk about Viva Connections. Now I know, and I was about to say Gary knows, but we'll find out in a minute. Anoop, what is Viva Connections?
Right. So Viva Connections is part of the Microsoft Viva suite. So it is one of the offerings of Microsoft Viva. And we can think of Viva Connections as a gateway to modern employee experience. Now, it has been designed in such a way that it keeps the employees engaged and informed about what's happening in your organization. So,
so it's just SharePoint, is it?
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, it has got elements of SharePoint in it, but it's designed in such a way that it works very well with Teams. So Teams becomes your entry point for Viva Connections, and then once you are in Viva Connections via Teams, there are elements of Viva Connections that you can interact with, and all these elements focus on the theme, which is keeping you engaged and informed. So that's
and I think that connection word, it's connected as well, isn't it? It's connected to what you need as an employee on there. So it's other people, it's the tools, it's the information that you need from there, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. So I keep on saying these two words, engaged and informed, and then connection is also in that same direction. So yeah, basically they want Microsoft want you to be connected with what's happening in your organization, and you are up to date with the latest information. So yeah, that's in a sense Viva Connections according to me.
So that gets surfaced, as you say, via Teams. For those who've got lovely SharePoint pages they've built out already, that's effectively by default at the moment, and maybe we'll come to that in a sec, kind of surface through Viva Connections. But I think there's more to it, isn't there, than just SharePoint in terms of
Yeah.
surfacing and engaging and informing and connecting and all the other good buzzwords that Microsoft loves us to use.
Yes, that's right. So I think we can talk about the different elements involved in Viva Connections, because I think that kind of makes sense to get to your question. So so Viva Connections itself is made up of different elements, and one of these elements is the home site. So the way, if you think of it, what happens is you go into Teams, and then there'll be an app called Viva Connections if that is set up by your tenant administrators. And then you open the Viva Connections app, and that app currently shows the home site of your tenant. So your tenant administrators would have decided that, hey, we will call our landing site of the intranet as the main site of our intranet as the home site, and that becomes the entry point for Viva Connections. And then once you are in Viva Connections, you see the home site, and this home site will contain different elements of Viva Connections. So we've got the dashboard, we've got the feed, and we've got the resources. So all these three elements, again, follow the theme of keeping employees engaged and informed. And yeah, all these three components or within the home site make up Viva Connections. So yeah, if you want, we can delve a bit more into these components, if that's okay.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, yeah, right. So
It's going to be a very short show otherwise. And Gary will
yeah.
start talking about to do, and we don't want that.
I've done enough that day. Go on, Anoop.
Right. So yeah, like I said, we've got the home site in our tenant, which is the main, which can be the main site of the intranet, and then
And we've said sites just because I know
yeah,
a lot of our listeners come from a kind of classic background. We're talking about a SharePoint site there, aren't we?
yes, yeah. So we are talking about a SharePoint site, which is a communication site, uh, a modern
That's a good
communication
point.
site,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah. So that is that can be designated as a home site of the tenant. And there are articles provided by Microsoft which explain how to set a site as a home site. Yeah, so once a site has been set up as a home site, we'll get the different elements. We'll get to see different elements of Viva Connections to see within the home site. So one of those elements is the dashboard. So what a dashboard is, uh, you can think of a dashboard as, say, for example, to give you an analogy, think of a car dashboard. Yeah, so you've got various components like the speedometer, the fuel gauge, the engine revolutions meter, etc. So similar, these are the different components of a car dashboard. Similarly, if you map that to Microsoft 365, you'll have different components. Like one component might show how many leaves you've got, annual leaves you've got remaining. Another component might show, you know, uh, whose birthday is coming up soon and things like that.
Or connected to your line of business apps, your kind of critical
Yeah,
data that can all be defined.
exactly. Yeah. So all these different components make up the dashboard. So the intention of the dashboard again is to keep you informed about the different things that are happening within the organization. And yes, yeah, yeah,
Different things, but related to you as an individual as well. So
yeah,
it's a very dynamic and personalized dashboard as well. So you touched on that leave. That is your leave that you have available. It's not the number of days left for the organization that you don't care about. You want to know about you. This is your personalized, employee centric view of your data.
That is correct. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I see that there is there a question? See something in the chat. Sorry, or should I?
And this is a lovely gentleman. So we are live for people listening. So
Oh, okay, right. Okay.
do we want to hit this? I think we will hit this now. So we've talked a lot about the home site. We talked about that in SharePoint, but I think Anoop, there's something that should be landing in tenants almost literally as we speak, isn't it?
Uh, uh, so sorry, I missed that last part.
I was saying there's something that the new Viva Home, which is
Yeah.
different to home sites, is
Yes.
landing in tenants as we speak. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yes, that's right.
Talking about.
Yeah, so it that was GA'd, I think, just recently, maybe a few last week or something, or
Yeah.
it's still going on.
Still rolling out, but yeah, has gone to
Yeah.
GA.
Yes, yeah. So should be available in all the tenants soon. So that is a slightly different home experience, which is so yeah. In Viva Connections, we've got two types of home experience. One is the home site, and the other one is this new home experience, which is provided by Microsoft. So yeah, that should be available soon, and there are ways to enable that within our tenant. There is a
So that new Viva Home, it was announced. Was it back in September? I think it was September or October. There was an event that Satya Nadella kind of hosted along with Jared Spatero on there. And that was one of the announcements that came from that event. And the aim was, and we were quite excited about this as the Viva Explorers, and my former employee as well was very excited about it, because it meant that where we had all these new Viva apps, there could have been a point where you had to have 9 different apps down the left-hand side, which, considering you'd have other teams' apps, apparently some people use things other than Viva. I don't know why, but you'll be losing all those. This new Viva Home is a kind of central place that gives you links to each of those apps, but also those 3 things you talked about of the dashboards, the feeds, and the resources. They'd all be shown there as well. And I think there was more that was kind of built into that feed to surface information from the other Viva pillars or Viva apps as they are now, that would kind of surface information. So, you've got learning coming up, you've got here's a trending topic, that kind of thing would start to come through that kind of main notification screen as well. So it was pretty much a simplified version of that.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, if you do not have a home site set up, then and you install the Viva Connections app, then you get the home experience by Microsoft that is provided by Microsoft, which and some of the elements within the home experience are customizable, and some of them are not. So it's basically an easy way to get started with Viva Connections, the new home experience. However,
and you can switch between the two as well. So if you had a home site set up, there's kind of a button to jump very quickly and easily between the 2 different versions.
Correct. Yeah. So if you have a home site set up already, and then you don't want the new home experience by Microsoft as the default experience of Viva Connections, then yes, you've got an option to switch that to be the default experience to be your home site and not the home experience provided by Microsoft.
So I think this is the really important point, and I can see the question that came through on there was, there's been mixed answers to this. So if you had a home site already, when this new home site rolls out, there's been mixed responses as to whether it would default to the new one or retain the old one. I'll be honest, and I don't think any of us have either. I haven't tried this yet in any of my tenants. I haven't seen the home site appear yet. However, there is a bit of PowerShell, and we'll link to an article in the show notes that you can run that will guarantee which one you want will be there. So you can run this now, even if it hasn't hit your tenant, and that will make sure that either your existing home site that I'm sure you've invested a lot of effort into, or the new Viva Home site, if you want that to be the new one, will become the one. So if you're at all unsure, I would definitely think about running that just to make sure. I believe, and I think Anoop, you said this when we were chatting before the show, so it's quite funny it's come up in the chat. You think that if you set the SharePoint home site, that will be retained on there, but you don't know that for sure. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the thing. So the wording that I have seen is on docs.microsoft.com. So if your organization already has a home site and you want to keep it as the landing experience for Viva Connection desktop, use the PowerShell command provided by Microsoft. So with that, I cannot conclude that if you have a home site set up. And when you have the new home experience by Microsoft land in your tenant, whether you will see your home site by default or you have to run the PowerShell script. So like you, Kevin, even I have tried running that CSOM code to do the switch, but it's still not available yet in my tenant either. So yeah, I'm as soon as I try that, I will let you know.
Yeah. Well, definitely set out. But I think I don't know. It is a tricky one. I know Microsoft obviously, sorry, Gary, wants to kind of push their new stuff. I hope that they're not in any way they're going to try and minimize the impact to people of this on there. And I know if you do have your own home site, there's going to link appear up the top so you can go to the new Viva Home, and I'm looking forward to that new Viva Home. I personally will probably, certainly in my own tenants, be changing to that as my main one because I've just got the landing set up there. So I just want that feed of data will be good. But other people who've invested a lot of corp comms time and money and efforts and bought some lovely intranets, such as Fresh and other ones are available as well, want to keep that intranet on there, and I think rightly so. So to answer the question, if you're not sure, run the script. I think it's the most important thing we can share there.
It's not even it depends answer. It's a we don't quite know answer in a way. It's the docs say one thing, but a verification of that is always nice. And I guess that's it takes time for these things to roll out. I mean, from what I'm hearing from both of you is that originally Viva Connections was there, that you went out and you had a communication site, you go and build it, you put the effort in there, you get everything set up as you wanted, and this new Viva Home is there for a quick way of having that landing page, right, that you don't have to go in and configure yourself, but then maybe that's something that you might want to do when people start to use the new experience, because it's just default, right? Everyone's getting the same. But to Anoop's point, and the great thing about SharePoint and the technologies we use is they're extendable, they're customizable. You can change them, and then you can see what works for you and your organization and your employees and the different capabilities that you can add on there. So it's one of those, if you've got there early, then you're kind of impacted. If you've
or very late. Maybe you've
very late.
kind of stuck on the old versions as well.
But I think we kind of sometimes do get stuck in our own little bubbles in a way, and we just assume that everyone is using all the latest, whereas a lot of organizations are not. They take time to adjust as well. So there is obvious benefit for Viva Home to come in and just give an experience kind of out of the box, which I think as part of Viva that's kind of, if you're kind of taking that on, I think that's what you'd expect, rather than here's the Connections app where you can then go and build your landing page and things like that. There's one thing that I kind of thought, and this you might not know the answer to this, but obviously the home site has impacts on news and becomes an organizational news source, and for basically making sure that news that's published at at that home site level is, prioritized in different areas of SharePoint. Is that the same with Viva Home or not? I just wondered if you knew that.
With respect to the news, so you know that there is a component of Viva Connections called as feed, which is a combination of news and I think it's
Stuff you've
stream.
done, documents. Actually, no, it doesn't have documents, does it?
No, I think it's news and videos
It's definitely
from
got
stream.
events. Yeah, and events as well.
Yes, right. So, and there is a way, I mean, it's all personalized. So, all the data that you get in the feed. However, um, there is a way to promote some news so that it appears on top. And Microsoft have some
This is for
nice
news
articles.
for the content creators. So, like corporate comms, they can
Yes,
boost news effectively
yes.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, because like I said earlier, engaged and informed. So feed is also around that theme of keeping employees engaged and informed. So of course, they will see news that is relevant to them, but the content creators will have some ability to influence the content in the feed, not completely.
And that feed as well, it's not just a linear time-based feed, it's algorithmic based. So all
Yes.
those people who kind of complain about Facebook feeds and Twitter feeds, yeah, you've now got your own feed that will kind of take into account who you work with, who you chat to, who you have meetings with, who you email, and build those connections, what those people like, what people related to them like, and will surface content based on that logic. So you should, and generally, I've seen some pretty good things come through from there. It is content that I want to know about on there. It's not always going to be the latest. It's going to kind of move that around based on that within there. And I think I know there was some comments in the chat saying that some clients don't like change within there, and that's why you want to stick to the other homepage. The other thing is, I've had quite a few clients who don't want that feed because it's back to that classic conversation of, oh, it's surfacing knowledge I don't think it should be. I want some control over that. Now,
The delve
personally,
problem.
yeah, it is.
It's
And
back.
personally, I think you should be looking at your governance. You should be maintaining your content. Blah 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 blah. But and also when you first go live with SharePoint, you haven't got much content. You see this blank, repetitive stuff from there. That may be where you want to kind of put on the old one. We worked with one client for the first, I think it was 3 months. We didn't have that feed on, but we put it on a separate page where people could link and have a look at it. And we started to see how many people did. We got people to review that and got some feedback, and then moved it over onto the homepage once there was a suitable amount of content on there. So it's not just that you may want to avoid the Viva Home because you don't like change on there. It can also be that the content in there is just, it isn't up to what you want from day one. So you can transition between those two as well. So I'd say there's valid reasons. I hear your point about Delve, Gary, and kind of surfacing things you don't want to see. Yes, you should be looking at that. But and another one, we can I say? Yeah, I think so. We worked with a healthcare client, let's say that, and it was surfacing patient information on the homepage because that was in pages that they were looking at and they had access to. But you don't want that to appear up front the second you turn on kind of Viva Connections and everyone's walking around you. So that was a good reason why they wanted to sort of remove that from there. So you have got this control. You don't have to go with those things, but just make sure you're planning on that. Right, we've gone down more tangents. Dashboard, which I think is the big thing that you were going to talk a bit about, Anoop.
Yeah, sure. So, with respect to the dashboard, like I was saying earlier, it'll have various components which can be added onto the dashboard. And
So their dashboard, that's just Power BI, yeah?
no, that's a different dashboard. Yeah. So this one is, it's a dashboard. Viva Connections dashboard is made up of different components, which use adaptive card in order to render. Yeah. So these dashboards will have components like we mentioned earlier, which are personalized or can be targeted to a certain set of audience based on what needs to be displayed on the dashboard. And the components that can be added onto the dashboard are called as cards. And then some of those cards are provided by Microsoft out of the box. So you can add, it's like adding a web part. You go to this dashboard in the editing experience, click on the plus icon, and then add a card in a similar way wherein you add a web part onto a SharePoint page. And you can choose one of the cards provided by Microsoft and then configure it slightly. And then you have this component. And if you do not want one of the Microsoft provided components, you want a custom one, then we can develop custom ones and add those as well. And those.
So when you
Yeah.
say develop there,
Yeah.
what do you mean develop? Are we talking kind of configuring? Are we talking Power Platform? Are we talking, oh my God, C# help?
Right. So let's focus on web parts and then use that analogy for
Yeah.
these cards as well. So in SharePoint, we've got the web parts which can be added onto pages. Some of the web parts are provided by Microsoft. And if there is some functionality which is not met by the web parts provided by Microsoft, we ask developers to create custom web parts, which can then be added onto the page.
Now, I know you're part of the community. I just want it, if anyone's listening, you pay developers to create on there. We can go and ask people in the community, but we can't guarantee everyone's going to make them. So developers need to feed their families too.
Yeah, true. That's right. Yeah. So yes, so we've got the custom web parts. In fact, there are a lot of community web parts, as you say.
That is true. That is true.
Yes, yeah, which can meet a lot of needs, and yeah. So similarly, we've got these card components on the dashboard. Microsoft have provided some of those. We can add those onto our dashboard and then customize them slightly, which might meet our needs. If that is not the case, then we can extend these cards by writing some custom code, and then that's why the name adaptive card extensions. And then those customized cards can be developed similar to the way we develop SharePoint framework web parts.
So we're talking more kind of JavaScript, might be a C# backend. We're talking. I don't know if pro code's still the right thing, but that's generally what it's about, isn't it? For that dynamic data side of it.
Correct. Yeah. That's correct. So. Sorry, Gary. Did you want to?
No, I was just going to say, you kind of mentioned a few things there. It's almost like it's, so you've got a dashboard, you want to configure this however you want to configure it. There's some out of the box things that you can kind of move around and get provided. You can have custom cards, and your first kind of entry point is really changing the cards that can be rendered in the page. So not using development tools, but actually changing some of the configuration, because it's an adaptive card. That's declarative. It's, you describe an adaptive card through JSON, and you could provide your own JSON that's static, but might be, you might want to have an image on there and a button, and that might, maybe even put static data in there that you update on a regular basis, right? But it's disconnected. It just lives in that page. It doesn't connect to the outside world. Your next step is where you're starting to talk about actually getting into custom code, extending the functionality of that card, calling data sources, calling the graph API for information, or calling an API that is one of your line of business systems to pull information into the card there, and do lots of other things. So there's a bit of a journey there, right? In that you don't have to just go straight to dev, you can,
Correct.
you know, development per se,
bits of a journey.
yeah, you know, it's kind of list formatting, right? If we're going to use that as an analogy,
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
List formatting, you know, I'm sure Chris Kent is the JSON developer, so you know, it's a skill set, right? And we see some amazing things that are done in list formatting just through JSON, right? And adaptive cards has the ability to do that, but obviously there's certain limits. But it's, you know, we talked about extensibility and having the, you know, ability to go, well, actually we need to move this a little bit further, or we need to get extra functionality over and above what we can get out of, you know, just configuring some JSON. That's a possibility, right? So there's lots of scope for customizing at all different levels and abilities, and skills.
And we should probably talk about the two different types of card, because when you view that dashboard, and, you know, Anoop, you were talking about seeing the amount of leave you have left, and, you know, you can see expenses is my other favorite one, or here's your task you're meant to be doing, or projects that you're meant to be working on today. That shows you that view, and that's dynamic. That will live update when you load the page, isn't it? I'm just suddenly thinking it won't. Generally, I don't think you can see that as a live auto refresh, can you?
I mean, these customizable cards can be customized in such a way that you can make it auto refresh even if you do not refresh the
Even
page.
on the kind of home page. So maybe let's come back to that one sec. So you've got that main card, you've got a limited, you can use adaptive cards, but there's a limited amount you can edit on there. You basically got a small bit of text, you can add some icons, an image, but you can click on that and that will expand a card, and then you've got the full power of adaptive cards within a pop-up window where you can bring in all sorts of things on there, and that really gives you the flexibility. And I think, Gary, where you were talking about going down that full developed route, you know, you can bring in, when you click on this, events happening exactly as you're saying, Anoop. You could have things connected to live data and triggering and having stuff there. I don't think you can on the main dashboard card, can you? But correct me if I'm wrong there. Definitely, I haven't tried.
Oh, okay. I mean, so you can refresh that information. Say, for example, there is a sample in one of the PnP repositories. Nice. What that does is, it's just for demonstration purposes. So it just goes and gets some of the new messages from a particular chat within Teams. Let's say you've got 8 messages, and then you get a new message, and it says you've got 900 messages, something like that. So
it's a quiet day for Gary.
Yeah, it keeps listening, and you can refresh the information.
Really, so you could have notifications on your Teams one, on your phone, on your desktop, and now within Viva Connections as well, all letting you know there's a new post today.
Rather than the notification, it's just on the dashboard.
The cycles.
It just refreshes. Yeah.
So what you're just saying is, if you want a stock ticker on your Viva dashboard, you can have it live and updating, which I know lots of big organizations, that's the very first thing that's needed. We want to see what the share price is. Right?
Yeah. In fact, there is a sample related to that as well.
Which is kind of interesting, because I remember years and years ago being, you know, kind of consultant in the intranet space, and we were talking about all these things, the tickers and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of that coming back again, really, isn't it? But it's in a more formulated way, rather than just kind of like, here's a communication site, build a lot of web parts and throw them into a page. Now it's actually, there's a framework, right, that you're building into, and that's where the adaptive card extensions and the dashboards that go in Viva Home, that's where it standardizes all of that as well. So, you know, most internet homepages are a dashboard of sorts, right? Which have these, you know, in your face, the quick kind of glance at, you know, things that are personal to you, like your your holiday and share price and all that kind of stuff, or then links out to apps as well. As I remember that the app bar was probably the most commonly asked for thing. I want to get to a particular place quickly from my homepage, and hearing you talk
But
about
you've got that, plus you've got data that can come from that app as
exactly.
well. I mean, it's really powerful.
Yeah, but it simplifies a lot of it from the story that I know there'll be a lot of organizations that'll have an intranet homepage that'll have a dashboard in, but it might be an older technology looking at Viva Home and going, well, actually, can we replicate a lot of this using kind of the just the adaptive card approach, and then build up to web parts and actually get rid of loads of custom code by actually inheriting Viva Home or the home sites. So it's interesting to see that it's not that an upgrade now of an intranet going into SharePoint Online, for example, is we need to rebuild these all as SharePoint framework web parts because they're on the homepage. Well, actually now it could just go into these adaptive card extensions. So it's interesting to see how we've moved on, if you like. It's a similar story, but the technology is making it much easier and quicker to get to where you want, that dashboard feel.
Absolutely. I think my one grumble about Viva Connections, and I've been a big fan of it. I was lucky enough to join the Dev Kitchen and sort of see the power. And I think, Gary, you hit the nail on the head on that. Quick links that are targeted, so you haven't got hundreds of things there. It can be personalized to different roles, so your engineering teams can get their engineering updates from their apps. Your operations team or even your marketing teams can have stats from Google Analytics surfacing through there. It can be relevant to an individual. My biggest grumble is the fact that you haven't got a proper low-code way of doing that. And I would love to see Microsoft bring that along, or the community to bring it along as well, to be able to connect in at very least the Microsoft stuff. I think the authentication is probably the most painful bit, but I know I've had a chat and started trying to look at having a Dataverse connector. So if you have Dataverse that you can connect in, service that, use adaptive cards to render it, which will make it easier to kind of surface a lot of information. I think there's a sample, I can't remember if I've tried this or seen it. I think there's one that allows you to connect up to SharePoint APIs, but the same with Graph. If you could easily surface Graph information, that would hit an awful lot of ones on there, because much as I do love developers, there's a lot within this that is just surface data. It should be easy to do. But I just do need to be careful here. What I mean is, what I'd love to see developers create is those really enticing, impressive interfaces. So, for example, I've seen that worked on with someone an example of putting timesheets into there, so you don't have to jump into a separate app to do your timesheets. That it kind of pops up, you can see your numbers. Generally, hopefully, it's one-to-one and nice and simple. Hit go with a link, a deep link into the other application where you can go and do more. But surfacing it and making it easy for people up front would be really helpful. I kind of feel there's a lot of simple scenarios that could be met by low code in the same way the Power Platform, and you can with web parts. You can put a Power App within that. Why not Viva Connections? It annoys me.
It's great feedback for the product group.
But a plea to people: if anyone wants to get involved, I do not have enough time or headspace to try and do dev, and the amount I do dev these days takes me about 10 times as long as it used to. I'm finding the evenings through bitter experience right now. But if anyone's interested in kind of getting a community effort going, I would love to help out with that.
Yeah, it's like you say, it's making it more accessible, right? It always makes me laugh when, yes, authentication is difficult, and yes, it is the most difficult part. Auth is difficult. There's lots of I guess initiatives to make it easier, but there's lots of moving parts. But even back, you mentioned dev kitchens. I remember seeing some demos that were done with the very early versions of adaptive cards extensions, and just being
who was that?
blown away. Absolutely. Well, one of them actually now works in the team building it. So if there's any
Yeah, that's
confidence
right.
behind
Yes, now I
the
remember.
technology, yes, that some of those demos were that good that it's a case of, yes, we want you to work on this. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's like with anything, organizations need to build on it and use it and see the value of home and connections. And the more organizations take that up, then we'll see more improvements and enhancements around these
Absolutely.
stories. I kind of joke about great feedback for the product group. Like with anything, there's the Microsoft feedback portal as well, to go on there, put feedback in there, speak to people.
Can I just say thank you for not calling it user voice? I can never remember what it's called. So congratulations there.
See, it's RIP user voice. So put your suggestions on there, get your votes, and get your message out to people. And if you have a feedback item on there that has lots of comments and lots of upvotes, it's gonna get noticed. And it's always a good point to, when you're talking to someone from Microsoft as well, like at a conference, and you go, oh, will this be really good? You could go, well, actually, there's this feedback post, and maybe I'll just send that on to you. And then you're providing them with all the information as to why it's important to you and why it's important to other people. Because it's great to go, oh, well, I've spoken to lots of people and they're interested. It's kind of like, okay, well, what's a lot of people? Is it 5? Is it 500?
Prove it.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely look at Microsoft feedback.
There's a couple of good comments in the question. Some people saying, can you use Adaptive Card Designer for Viva Connections dashboard? So for the main dashboard element that you're seeing there, no. It's kind of a lockdown version called the Adaptive Card Extension, which uses a very smaller subset of the adaptive cards. When you click on that and open it into the bigger version that pops up, then yes, you can actually use adaptive card extensions and render that. And in fact, there is one of the Anoop, you mentioned the out of the box Microsoft ones. One of those is an I think is it called what's it called, Card Designer. I think on there you can literally open the card designer and it will link to the same thing as the adaptive card site. You can go in there, design that, copy and paste that JSON across, copy and paste get me your words right, Kev. Copy and paste the data JSON across, have both those in there. It's not dynamic, it is static, as we were mentioning earlier. You can use that adaptivecars.io and have that render there. And we will put in the show notes, there's some great samples, Alex Clark, Derek Cash-Peterson, and others that have done on the PnP calls that have those kind of hard-coded ones as well. And I'll also put a link, there's within the what's it called? Not the App Store. I'm going to get in trouble for calling it that. But within the store, there is a version. Oh, what's it called? Beginning with a. Someone's going to remember in a minute. But Derek Cash-Peterson and Simpraxis have a great app that you can just install. It will do all the setups for you and put a sample. I think it's about 12 samples. So if you've got a test environment that you want to show things in, really, really simple and easy way to get going on there, which is great.
Yeah, it's based on adaptive cards. It's still using the schema from adaptive cards. If you look at the templates in the PnP library, you'll see in there that there's just a JSON file. You'll see kind of there's extra elements that are additional in there. But majority, if you're used to adaptive cards, it's not a huge difference, not a huge jump. There's just extra little bits in there as well. But yeah, it's interesting. Adaptive cards, right? A nice declarative way of being able to just say, display my data. You don't have to worry about the styling and CSS and all that stuff. That
whoa. Sorry, you do need to worry about styling. Maybe not CSS, but it should make it look good.
Oh yeah. But the adaptive cards does go a way to helping that as well.
Anoop, we've hijacked this. Is there anything else you wanted to add there onto that?
Yeah, that's what, like you mentioned, there is a sample repository in which each sample has I think 2 files. One is the adaptive card JSON itself, which defines the look, and then the second file in those samples is the data file. So the data and the JSON get mashed together, and that's what you will see in the adaptive card extensions. So yeah, those samples are very good. They'll help you get started. In fact, one of the samples I think is around FAQs. So that can be static data. So FAQs might change over a period of time, but you can change the data by going into the card itself and updating the FAQs. So yeah, it's a very good repository to get started with.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think the other thing about adaptive cards, and you mentioned not doing styling, Gary. I think the key to them is they will render in a responsive way. So they will work on your kind of big screen, they will work on a small screen, which means, and this brings up to another topic we're going to talk about, they will work on mobile devices. So a really important thing about Viva Connections is they get surfaced really easily on Teams on the mobile. So you can go into there, you can see that the feeds, the resources, and that dashboard can also be there on that mobile, which I know many people, it's a hot topic for Microsoft at the moment, is the frontline worker, the people who are out and about all day, who aren't sat at their desks like the more traditional information worker. And I say traditional, more traditional to the Microsoft audience. And I'm sure what many of us kind of used to, sitting on our backsides, not doing much, or maybe occasionally standing and then sitting down again as soon as the camera goes off, not looking at myself or anything there. But this means that you can get that same dynamic view to people who are out and about on the move. So you can get those alerts. Here's your numbers. Here's all your things through in a relatively easy way to use within Microsoft Teams on there. So you can start to build connections to different people's surface. For example, here's your training you need to do. I think Anoop earlier, you talked about the news, and you talked about that being the feed, so you can get that feed of news. But there's also one of the dashboard cards is here's the top news. And to me, this is something that I think will be an interesting route with some of the frontline worker is we're kind of used to being at our desk and kind of seeing notifications and dealing with them when they come along, unless you're better behaved like Gary, who will kind of roll things together and look at that summary. But if you're out and about, NHS workers or healthcare workers in the UK, you don't want to get distracted. You want a way of prioritizing, and that could be through that. You could see your numbers, you can see your different systems. You could see where the number of key patients are, or here's the number of bits of document that you need to complete, or bits of paperwork and red tape you need to fill out. You can prioritize within that and see that summaries more easily using the kind of frontline worker apps, and jump into those applications without going between 5 or 6 different apps. You can do that within Teams. And if the developers, we're talking about the pro code solution, have built in the functionality, you can react and do things with those, not be jumping between different things. And I think that, to me, is a very powerful way, because one of the things that we hear a lot across the Microsoft 365 space is there's so many different apps, and especially if you're not just using Microsoft, but you've got ServiceNow, you've got your own bespoke apps for an organization, you're jumping between different things to find things. For a frontline worker, that's even worse. If you can put it in one place, you've got one place to go and a common way to do things that's a lot easier for others as well.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about first line workers. I'm using the Teams mobile app more and more, and I am permanently based at home. And I use it when I go and take the dog for a walk, or I listen. I just need to get out because I've been working, or I just need to change a location, and it's whilst I'm out, or I can still get to Teams, I can still get to my chat, but actually, now I can get to my company news if I want to have a read, and whilst I'm out having a quick walk to break up the day. So yeah, I'm finding the Teams app being used more and more. And yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a first line worker. It's just another way of being able to kind of fit I guess the the tools that you use on your desktop into your working day, which is not just fixed in front of a desk.
Yeah.
We're all part of employee experience, right? Is to also relax. Elements of Viva, go take a break.
Sorry, relax by
Relax.
checking your phone while you're out and about. I'm ignoring that part. But,
But it's different, isn't it? It's just different way
yeah.
of viewing this, and it's kind of having that flexible nature in the way that you want to work, or yeah. I find it useful anyway.
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely agree, and also having that different ways of being able to consume that data. That'd be interesting. To know how much I think we're talking about this before the show, Gary, about different ways of building apps for frontline workers and getting more voice centric, because people often don't have access with their hands. Whether there's kind of options there, and obviously Teams has the accessibility built in, so it. I'm not going to say too much more because I haven't tried this, but obviously the accessibility should work with that. You should be able to trigger things and do things in a manual way. That's got me pondering and wondering other things. I'm going to shut up now before I cause trouble, but that might be an interesting route from that as well. So I think we're getting close to wrapping up. Anoop, now I've given you a little bit of warning in the chat to have a think about this. What's kind of the favourite scenario that you can talk about without breaching any NDAs or client confidentiality? What's your kind of favourite scenario you've seen with Viva Connections?
So yeah, being a developer for me, these custom adaptive cards or the ACEs are the main things. And so my favorite scenario. So one of these ACEs is my favorite scenario. So I think there are a lot of community samples out there, which which talk about how we can use ACEs yeah, in different ways. But the one that I like quite a lot is the it's a stock updater one. I mean, the ones that keeps. Yeah,
It's all about
it,
the money, I get.
yeah, it's it's quite neat. I mean, it's very simple. So if you want to get started with ACES, you can have a look at that sample. Just a few lines of code, and then you are there, because uh, when you start creating an ACE using SharePoint framework, most of the code is already there for you, provided by SharePoint framework, and you just have to add your custom code on top of that to make things work. And this particular sample, um, shows how you can use something called as web sockets in order to get the data from an external API, and then refresh the data, so as and how the stock price changes. So that one is quite good. So I hope that answers the favorite scenario bit. Yeah.
It's a nice one. That's obviously a company that's got a good stock price going up quickly at the moment. Then, so it's got me wondering who that is. And I think the other one with that, obviously, you've got Azure Functions, you've got Logic Apps, your
Yes.
kind of ACE can connect up to that.
Yeah.
That does mean that if you've got and I've suddenly forgot what it's called, but you can have that connection from Logic Apps and the Power Platform down through the connector, which one of you will remember what it's called in a minute, into your on-premises environment. You can surface data from on-premises as well through that in that secure way. So it's not just kind of custom apps, not just cloud apps that you can surface those APIs. It is possible to connect to your on-premise existing ones as well. I think that's, it opens it up to almost a way of surfacing that data. Yes, there's challenges. You've got to look at the security, make sure you're happy that data going up for things like that. But the potential is there to surface that and bring your custom apps from all over the place as well, which I think is really, really nice way of looking things too. My favorite scenario, apart from the timesheet one, because anything that stops me having to go into timesheet apps is a good one. I've seen onboarding apps on there that kind of talk about your onboarding tasks, and because we talked about things being personalized, you can have personalized groups, whether they're kind of in a single onboarding group or whether there's a cohort you can have there. Here's your kind of open task that's go and chat to someone new, go and learn this bit from there. And you can have how many tasks you've got open, click on that, see those tasks and jump off to the different things. So it kind of, to me, I love that one because it brings that personalization through as well.
I was just going to say, off the back of Anoop saying about the scenario. So yeah, it's open source, so I quickly took a look at the scenario, look at the template, and we're talking about code and writing JavaScript and things like that. Definitely, if you're interested on how much code is actually involved, go and check the actual template, because it's not a lot. A lot of it is given to you by SharePoint Framework by standard. You're defining your REST call, you're defining the properties that you might want to be able to be changed by end users and your view. And it's not a lot of code, really, is it? We're not saying you're writing thousands of lines here. It's a small extension. So as well as we kind of talk about low code, pro code, don't be put off and think, oh, it's pro code, therefore it's a lot of code.
Are you saying, Gary, that we need a new definition of a little bit of pro code?
Yes.
Your new category in there. I quite like
definitely. That. Yeah. It's not a lot. And yeah, it's JavaScript. It's in a framework that's already used and has been in use for years. SharePoint Framework, it's battle hardened as well, with great support and roadmap in front of it as well. So yeah, making that jump into the pro code side is not as maybe kind of as worrying as maybe you may feel. Definitely check that out.
Yeah, that's right. And sorry for another tangent here. Between low code and pro code, a term between low code and pro code, that reminds me of a joke I've heard in one of these sitcoms. The size between large and medium must be called Marge. So yeah, it's something like that, isn't it?
I'm trying to go what's between low and pro, loop. Yeah, no, it doesn't work. I like Marge. We'll stick with Marge.
I'll stick with Marge.
You've hit it her first. Marge code. It's what Viva Connections dashboards are.
Yeah.
So, Anoop, what's next for you in the world of Viva Connections? Is it just kind of carrying on to build out new apps? Where are you excited about seeing next?
Yeah, so I'm looking forward for the new home experience to land soon in my dev tenant so that I can play with it. And yes, definitely contributing more and more adaptive card samples as and how I develop them. Yeah, and then also I think a couple of sessions lined up in some of the conferences on ACES. So yeah, that's next for me.
Where can we see it? I think you mentioned before, I hope I can out you on this, but you're going to be speaking at the Collab Summit.
Yes, that's right. So in Dusseldorf, that's towards the end of May. And I'll be talking about Viva Connections ACES. So there'll be
Nice.
some code in that session as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I know Gary will be there as well. I'm sadly not, and still bitter about it. Damn kids is all I'm going to say. But yeah, no, that'd be great to see you. And yeah, hopefully people will come and say hello and say how much they've enjoyed some of the PnP stuff and your appearance here as well. But thanks very much for coming to join us. It's always a pleasure, and I always come away feeling very happy because of that great beaming smile of yours that appears from there. Always makes me feel better as well. So thank you very much for joining us. We've got in a couple of weeks Femke Cornelissen, who's recently moved to Wartel as an evangelist there. So she'll be joining us in a couple of weeks. So do watch out. Next 2 weeks' time on a Monday, we'll be chatting with her. I can't remember about what, but I'm sure it'll be great. And Femke's fantastic, so it's always a good chance to chat to her. But thank you very much, Anoop. I've been Gray.
Someone's been Hat. Oh, we've got a hat.
You've forgotten that bit. Yeah.
I've been beard.
And we'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.